Well, good morning, people. What's up? All right, so Boyd Baumgartner there in the back is my pop culture judge. He makes sure that everything pop culture kind of syncs up. So am I correct or incorrect? I promise, I just thought about this. Was that Van Halen Hot for Teacher? It totally was. Yeah, I'm like, I know this beat. Interesting choice. All right, so we're a group of imperfect people redeemed by a perfect God. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pray right now, and we're going to get underway. That was funny. All right, so let's go ahead and do it together. Jesus, I thank you for the fact that you love us and that you pour grace into our lives. And we need that grace. As we just joked, it's a reality. We are imperfect people. We are redeemed by you. We are changed by you. We are brought into life with you purely by your grace. We cannot earn it. We don't deserve it. We are not good enough for it. And yet you just rush into our lives and you impart something that changes everything. And I pray that even as we wrap up today, this particular section of Exodus, that we're reminded of that again, this just highlights the fact that we need your good news to penetrate our lives and to change our brokenness, to change our fears, to change our anxiety, to change our cravings, to crave things that truly give life and health and abundance. And so continue to remind and teach us of those things today. Jesus, we love you, we thank you, we praise you in your perfect name. Amen. This morning, you should actually have your hands raised in the air because you were trotting across the finish line of the 10 Commandments. Well done, people, well done. You have done it. You're like, we clap for ourselves for that? No, I'm clapping for you. You have made it through the 10 Commandments. Today is the last of the 10. And I want to start off by reminding us of the purpose, all right? The 10 Commandments, while we are learning these from the perspective of how we can implement them and how we can pursue living more in accordance with what God has revealed to us. At the same time, their purpose is to recall to mind and to kind of prove to us that we, in fact, need God's grace. Because these 10 things are things that we are not naturally good at. These are 10 things that we tend to fail on at some point in life, some more often than others, but they all remind us of the fact that we are broken, that we are incomplete, that we tend to look at God's lines in life and we cross those, sometimes on accident, sometimes on purpose, because at our core, we are an interested, self-interested type people. And so we need this good news of Jesus, this gospel, to come in and change our lives. And the 10th commandment proves that just as much as any of the others. Now, when I was thinking about this week, I was reminded about how the United States is very diverse, right? We call ourselves a melting pot. And if you just start to think about it, we know that there are all kinds of people represented in this room. For example, you have dog people and you have cat people, right? And I'm not going to say which one is worse, cat people. I'm not going to say it, but if you had, there's just differences, right? And you have Mac people and you have PC people. You have book people and you have Kindle people. You have pro sports people, you have college sports people. The list goes on and on of all of the differences and diversity that we have. You have people that love rap music and you have people with taste in music. There's so much difference out there. You have gracious people and you have jerky opinionated pastors, all right? So, you have all kinds of stuff, but at the core, there is something that unifies us. There is something that we all seem to have in common as Americans, and that is we are consumers, right? We have the desire to acquire. We have Amazon appetites and wish lists to prove it on Amazon. Right? I don't know about you, but I have a wish list, and I was going through it just last night, and I'm like, wow, this is really long. There's a lot of things I wish for in life, right? And I go, that's just kind of the American way. And Amazon tapped into that. They're like, okay, you have Amazon appetites. We're going to give you a place where you can put all your wishes and wildest dreams, and one day, hopefully, you can buy all of those things. And this is where then the 10th commandment kind of squares this up and kind of proves to us that we perhaps have a tendency to go down paths and to cross lines that aren't always as healthy as maybe they could be for our lives. In fact, the 10th commandment starts off by saying this. It says, you shall not covet. You shall not covet. Now, if you're taking notes with us, we have notes in our app that you can have on your phone or tablet or whatever else. We have a series of notes in there. And we're going to start off with the very first thing that the 10th commandment kind of deals with in our life. It warns us to don't be a consumer. Don't be conned into being a consumer, right? That is its warning. It says don't covet. Covet means to desire, to crave, to yearn, to long, to lust. To basically have this concept in your mind that says, I need whatever the thing is. See, that's that spirit of coveting that God is kind of warning about. And what's interesting about this particular command is, unlike the others that were very much about the action, this one's about the attitude. Right? It doesn't say don't steal, that was earlier. This one says inside your person, inside your mind, your heart, your life, your yearnings and longings, you don't want to have this spirit of coveting within you. You want to have this craving that kind of drives you in life, this obsession for possession. Now, what's interesting to me about this is we live in a time where what's very hip and cool and trendy right now is downsizing, right? And tiny houses and minimalization and live with less. And yet what I find is even for all of those things, it seems that what happens is people go, we're going to minimize, we're going to live with less, and we get rid of all of our old stuff, but then we start to collect new stuff. Right? So we minimize to upgrade, you know what I mean? So it's less about upward mobility and it's more about stuffward mobility, you know? So we like the idea of small, but then we tend to kind of expand and increase and grow because at the core, while we talk simple, we live consumer driven. I mean, it's just sort of the American way. It's what we do. And we have proof. Right? All we have to do is go home and open any closet in our house. And there's stuff. And then we look at our 2-car garage can only fit 1 car. Because we've got stuff. And then some of us have storage units on top of closets and garages because we have stuff. And then we have our wish lists and our heads filled with desires, cravings, wants, needs, these things that go, oh, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. I mean, this seems to be more the American way. And so what that means for us today, if we're trying to take this particular command seriously, is we want to do a candid self-evaluation, right? We just want to look at our lives and say, okay, God says, here's this thing that is to protect me. Because again, I want to go back to what the 10 Commandments also do. They protect our lives. We tend to see commandments as kind of these killjoys, like, oh, I can't do this, and I can't do that, I can't do that. And God didn't give them to say, oh, here's this bummer. He gave them to say, here's this blessing, here's this good thing. If you do this, your life is going to go better. You're going to be a lot healthier. You're going to be more balanced. You're going to have a fuller, richer, more meaningful existence if you do these things. So they're not buzzkills, they're blessings. But we have to then look at this and do some self-evaluation and ask ourselves things like, well, if I tend to be more consumer-driven, stuffward mobility, desiring to acquire kind of thing, am I doing that because I'm a copycat just trying to keep up with everybody else because everybody else is amassing these things, so I amass those things as well? Or do I do it because I feel discontent? And therefore, I'm always trying to fill up the void of my life by getting the next new toy, the next new experience, the next new trip, the next new thing, because again, that's going to somehow reassure me or sustain me? Is it that I'm just easily bored? And so I have this thing, and after a few weeks or months or whatever, it's just, whatever, forget about it, go on to the next thing? Do I feel like I need to have stuff or things because that's a measure of my success or my achievement? I feel like I can tell people I've arrived because I have 2 cars, I have a home, I have a this, I have a that, I went here, I went there, whatever it is. Is it that upgrades keep me upbeat? Right? And just without the upgrades, I just don't have the same spring in my step. So we have to ask questions like that of ourselves. And sometimes they're awkward and uncomfortable questions. Now, am I saying that having drive or planning or purchasing is bad inherently? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it's just automatically wrong to go and acquire things. But it's when that desire begins to create discontent. Like, I'm not going to be content until I have. That's where we should start going, oh, maybe that is not such a good thing. Or I go into reckless debt so I can have what I want right now. Maybe that's where the lights on the dash start to flash in your life vehicle. Maybe it's where you feel anger or frustration because you don't have everything you always wanted to achieve. All your wildest dreams have not come true. And so you feel this like, man, why does everybody else succeed and I don't seem to get ahead in life like I wanted to? Or it's even when something that's supposed to be a God thing becomes an idol in your life and it becomes more important than God. Maybe that's where we need to become more self-aware of this command and say, is it intruding into my life? And I want us to understand when it comes to this, it's not just stuff, right? We can covet all sorts of things. We can covet people. We can covet attitudes. We can covet accomplishments, as well as stuff or experiences. All sorts of things can be craved and coveted in our lives. The proof is as the command goes on, it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything else that is your neighbor's. So to look at this a little bit more closely, I want us to, number 2 in your notes, run an I want inventory. You just got to run a personal inventory in your life. Look through that passage and say, are any of those something that I might be guilty of? Now, you might go through this and go, some of these things don't pertain to me at all, right? So I can look at this in my own life and look at these things and go, okay, I want inventory. Do I want your house? No, I don't want your house. My house is awesome. Not interested in your house, all right? You can keep it. I like mine. Do I want your spouse? Have you seen my wife? She's a turbo babe. I don't want your spouse. I don't want your spouse. I dig my spouse. My spouse is awesome. I don't need your spouse. Do I need your servants? No, I have children. I'm fine, right? Do I want your ox? Do I want your donkey? No, I'm not in 4-H. I don't have any interest, all right? So, but then it says anything else. Oh, why? Right? It suddenly takes it to this whole new realm, right? Where it can't just be like, all right, I clicked through, I'm fine because I don't need any of that stuff. If we would have just stopped with like donkey, we would all be good, right? With rare exception, right? But then God kind of rolls in on that last one. And it's like, you know what? Here's the bottom line. Anything else that your heart begins to crave, that somebody else has, that you feel incomplete if you don't have, then you're crossing the line of the 10th. And when I think about this, I go, there's some stuff that you all have that I wouldn't mind having. Some of you have cabins. I want the cabins you have. They're cool. Some of you have boats. That's epic. I want a boat. Some of you take great vacations. You have these awesome experiences. I'm like, I want that vacation. I want that experience. Some of you have sprinkler systems. I want that in July, right? Some of you have musical ability. Some of you have hair. It's like just a little. I mean, some of you could give some up. You know what I'm saying? So, for the record. And it's not just that, right? Even as a pastor, it's interesting to me. Pastors covet at times, all right? Just kind of moment of transparency. We covet like bigger churches. We want to be known. Buildings, that's something pastors covet, especially when you don't really have one yet. You tend to like, if we just had this, it would be so much better. If we just had that, it would be so much better. You covet maybe a little bit more giving in the church, or you can even covet really good things. You can covet people's joy or their faith. I just wish I had their faith. I just don't have it. Whatever it is, there's all kinds of things that can kind of get pulled into this equation for us. And I can guarantee you that the great American consumer machine doesn't help. Think about how much money is spent every single year to try to dry out the inner kindling of your life, to ignite the fire of the desire to acquire. Right? Marketing campaigns and ads and everything else that are really driven at their core to do one thing. Here's what marketing does at its core. It's designed to make you discontent in some conceivable way so that you buy the product that they're trying to sell you so that you can have contentment again. So it's meant to kind of say, isn't your life incomplete without our thing? So there you are, you're at home, the commercial comes on. Are you tired of those love handles? And you're like, well, I wasn't. I was fine eating my Rocky Road until you brought it up. And now that you brought it up, I am kind of discontent with my love handles. I'll just put my ice cream over here and buy your fat away pills, whatever it is, right? It's like that. Or like, are you tired of that old cell phone that's 18 months old, which I've decided like cell phones need to become the new dog years, It's like an 18-month-old cell phone is really like 87 years in phone years or something like that. And so it's like, are you discontent with that? Are you tired of being alone? Here's an eHarmony commercial, and you're like, yeah, I'm tired of being alone. I'm going to fill out this big thing, and I'm going to tell people all about me so they can reject me on the merits of who I am now. That is so wonderful. We literally had somebody we knew that filled it out, and the first thing they got was, there are no matches for you. And it's like, now I just feel all the more alone. Thank you for that. So, right? Or are you tired of those wrinkles by our cream that cannot stop the inevitable? I mean, there's any number of things. Tired of parallel parking your car? Buy this Ford. It will do it for you. I mean, it's just, the list goes on and on and on. Like, yes, I am so sick of parallel parking my own car. My grandpa today had to do that with a clutch, and right? It's just stupid stuff, right? So it's like everything is just meant to make us feel incomplete, right? That is the great American marketing machine of our lives. And so from that, it's very easy to covet. It's very easy to say, yep, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, I wish I had more, right? That's coveting. And so that's where we have to, again, slow down and just ask ourselves, do all of my wants kind of drive into this thing of just saying, man, my life would be a little bit richer, a little bit more full, a little bit more meaningful if I had that. If the American dream just was a little bit more my reality, then I would be okay. Well, it's in times like that I think it's important for us to do a little game I call playing the stockpile market. We want to play the stockpile market. And to kind of capture this, I've put together this little graph for us, right? So lifespan, of course, on the bottom, treasures on the top. This is where we just start to do an honest evaluation, an honest look at our lives and go like, how does this play out? So let me show you how life plays out. At the very first thing, man, you become a high school student, whatever else, you get your first job, and you're making money. You're upward, right? Like I have kids that still live at home, and like my kids, they would come home and like, Dad, I am rich. My paycheck was $482. I am freaking rich. I'm like, wow, I wish that was my world to say that. Like $482 maybe, but they're like, rich, this is awesome, this is great. And so man, upward mobility, it's so great when you're young and you're just buying like McDonald's and Taco Bell and gas and that's all your expenses, right? That's how it works. That's it. Maybe a couple of clothes at the mall, it's awesome. But then what happens in life? You go to college. Suddenly you're on a downtrend, right? Pretty soon you're like, man, I used to be going to Taco Bell every day. Now I'm eating ramen because it's like 6 cases for $4. And you're coming up with 101 ways to prepare top ramen, like frozen ramen with chocolate on top and boiled ramen and stewed ramen, like trying to just make it stretch, right? You have cinder block and wood for all of your like stuff in your house to keep your books on the shelves and stuff. So that's how it works. But eventually you graduate from college, you go into your job, you're making money again, you meet a spouse, it's double income, everything's climbing, it's good, you're feeling great. And then what happens? You have kids. Right? You understand the trend. They're just like black holes of cash. Right? Just take it all, right? Right? But this is what happens with the stockpile market. Sometimes you rise and sometimes you're falling, whatever else. But eventually you find your equilibrium in that. You get some raises. You kind of get mid-level in your career. You're making more money again. You're feeling good, upward trending. And then what happens? The kids, they go to college. I have one graduating next weekend. Got another one going to WSU in the fall. Got another one that's eyeballing some stuff with college. And so, right? Downward slide. But eventually they get through, and then you get into your higher earning years and everything else. You're climbing again. It's going great, everything else. And then you retire, right? And believe it or not, money does go down when you retire. It does, right? And part of that is I've talked to so many people that they're like, we're finally free to do whatever we want. So they start to do everything they want. And pretty soon they're playing golf every day and they're taking this trip and that trip. And then they're looking like, I think we're going to outlive our money. We're downtrending. right? I've known many people that started to realize we're downtrending, we're going to run out of money, so they find balance. They find, like, okay, we can do this, we can do that, everything else. And just as they find balance already, they die. Right? They die. That's it, right? That's all there is to it. So here's the painful reality. You are not living for stuff. You are dying for stuff. You are dying for stuff. And when you die, it's the same story with people who die. Nobody says, well, here's what is said. They say, there was a great white light. Nobody says there was a big yellow truck, right? Collecting all of my gear to take it with me to the next thing. There is no U-Haul on the other side saying, load her up. There is no pod waiting to crane your stuff to Jesus' eternal bliss, you know? It stays. It just stays. It's how it works, right? And so we just want to be honest with ourselves a little bit and say, man, this is the stockpile market. If I'm living to stockpile, if I'm living for stuff, one day I'm going to die and it's not going to matter anyway. It's not going to matter. I was really dying for everything. I was never living for anything in that sense. Besides, there's this other reality in all of this to me that if we're honest with ourselves, the desire to acquire is more the high than actually enjoying that which you acquire. Right? There's more of this like, oh, the want is the chase and that's fun. But then when you have it, well, then sometimes it's a little different. I mean, just think about our patterns, right? So we'll see something, oh, I got to have it, right? And we get it, and then we have it for a little while, and then eventually we're like, oh, I don't know if I like that anymore. I need a new thing, right? We do stuff like that. Or the first day we buy it, you're like, I'm going to look so awesome in that. And then one day you give it to Goodwill, and you're like, what was I thinking buying this, right? That's a pattern. I had the privilege one day, this was probably about 15 years ago, to spend an entire day with Benson Ford, who is the top heir of the Ford Motor Company. And I was at his house for the whole day in Sedona and just kind of getting to know him and asking questions. And man, talk about an example of somebody who had the power and capacity to purchase whatever and was bored with everything. Right? And he had this beautiful house and everything else right on the creek and was showing me all the cool things that are in the house. And he takes me out to his garage. And in his garage, this is not an exaggeration, there was like maybe 12 Harley Davidsons. There was some old classic cars, classic motorcycles, you know. And I'm like, man, you must really love to, you know, ride and drive. And he's like, oh, most of these I've never taken out. And he has like a dozen houses all over the world, right? And he says, I just kind of have every house stocked just in case. And then in the back, he had this big 16-passenger van he had just had brought out from Detroit. Had custom made by Ford, and it was like silver, and it was jacked up, and it was four-wheel drive and giant tires and all this mahogany inside and everything else. And he's like, yeah, I wanted something to drive from Sedona to Texas. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. What are you going to do when you get there? I don't know, probably sell it or something. I just wanted it to be fun for the trip, you know. And yet the whole time in talking with him, there was always this sense of kind of discontent, and life wasn't complete, and he was a little bit discouraged, and there was just, no matter what he purchased and what he did and what he had, there was just this void, this incompleteness. Though he could do everything, have anything, he was empty. It reminds me of a quote of all people from Friedrich Nietzsche that said this: even the most beautiful scenery will no longer have our love after we've lived within it for about 3 months. Possessions are generally diminished by possession. Possessions are generally diminished by possession. Now, again, does this mean we can't play the stockpile market at all? Is it that it's wrong to do this? Well, no, I'm not saying it's wrong. I mean, if we play properly, we play in such a way that, you know what, it doesn't own us, it doesn't try to fulfill us. We're not saying I'm incomplete apart from it. It's just like, I just have and I enjoy, and it doesn't have me. You're fine. You're fine to have possessions as long as the possessions don't possess you. That's something A.W. Tozer said. So you're fine there. But if it's like, no, I need, I crave, I'm incomplete, they fill a void, I won't be happy until I have the next thing, well, then that's going to be the problem. There you're going to take a loss. You're going to take a loss every time because you're not living for things, you're dying for things. So then we have to ask ourselves the real question: what are the signs of being consumers? What are the signs we look for in our lives? What are the things that maybe tip us off? Because sometimes we can self-deceive, right? I know I can. So I have 4 little things we can look at this morning, signs that we are consumers and engaged in consumerism. The first is, what am I sacrificing for stuff? That's the first question we ask ourselves. What am I sacrificing for stuff? I mean, you think about Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve, what did they do? They sacrificed freedom for knowledge, and it didn't go well. Or we see in 2 Kings chapter 3 that the king of Moab sacrificed his child for victory, and he didn't achieve it. 2 Samuel 11, David sacrificed his integrity for his lusts and wants. Or we see in Luke chapter 12 that there was this rich guy that decided, I'm going to build barns, and I'm going to build bigger barns, and I'm going to keep storing up, and he sacrificed his present for a future that when the future came, it was empty because he died the night that he was finally going to take advantage of his future. Right? And so all of these are examples where they sacrificed for stuff, and in the end, it didn't pay off. It was loss, it wasn't gain. Right? And that's where we want to look at our own lives and go, man, what am I sacrificing for stuff? Am I sacrificing my freedom for debt so I can have now and then I feel all constrained? Is that what I'm sacrificing, my freedom? Or am I sacrificing maybe my family because I'm just trying to make more money so we can do more things, but it's at the cost of my marriage or the cost of my kids? Am I sacrificing my health or my joy, my sleep? Because I just feel like this need to acquire somehow. And I'm just in that rhythm. I'm in that place. Maybe you're sacrificing your ability to be generous because you stretch yourself too thin. I mean, any number of things where we just want to honestly look at ourselves and say, hey, what am I sacrificing for this desire to fulfill the craving of coveting? We may not like that word, but it may in fact be what we're struggling with. We go, man, if I'm sacrificing really critical, important things that are more important than stuff or experience or whatever else, then maybe I need to make some adjustment. Second question we should ask ourselves is, what compels my drive to strive? What compels my drive to strive? Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 4 says this. He says, then I observed, this is Solomon, wisest dude that ever lived, didn't always live it, but was wise. It says, then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. But this too is meaningless. It's like chasing the wind. Notice that we call it keeping up with the Joneses. Nobody ever passes the Joneses, right? You're just trying to keep up. Nobody wins in that race. It's just this sprint to the end where everybody dies and that's it, right? You never actually accomplish what you want because of envy and distraction and discouragement and kind of this quest for wanting. If that's what's motivating you, it's always going to motivate you. It's like spurs. It's just going to stick you in the side to keep going. But you're never going to reach a state of, oh man, I got it all. I'm content. I'm at peace. Right? And so that's the thing. Is that the quest that I'm in? The third question goes a little deeper. Do I lean to contentment or resentment? Do I lean toward contentment or resentment, right? Proverbs 14:30 says this, a tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes the bones rotten. Right? Maybe the question I'd ask here is, are you generally happy for others' good fortune? So your friend gets a brand new car. Are you like, man, that's awesome. You got a new car. That's fantastic. Or are you a little bit more like, well, I bet the payments are terrible. I don't know how they afforded that. Oh, la-ti-da, right? And like there's this attitude that ultimately is kind of a jealousy. You might say, no, it's not a jealousy. It's just they're stupid. You know, whatever it is. But there can be that thing. Or somebody at work gets a promotion. Are you excited they got the promotion? Like, man, that's awesome. Congratulations. Or is it more like, why didn't I get that? Right? Really? They? Of all the people? Yeah, why? See, maybe it's something in that arena. Maybe your sibling gets married and they marry this really awesome person. You're like, man, they're just fantastic. And are you like, man, what a catch, way to go? Or are you more like, really, why them with them? They're way too good for my kid brother, or whatever. Like, there can be any number of things where we may struggle with contentment and have a little bit more of a sense of resentment. And we have to remember in all of this, contentment, it diffuses criticism. If you're content, you're not going to be critical. But if you resent, man, it ignites discontentment, and you'll just go deeper and deeper into it, right? And then the fourth thing is this. Ask yourself, is enough enough? Is enough enough? Ecclesiastes 5:10, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity. See, if enough is never enough, you're always going to be ensnared. You're just always going to be ensnared. I am going to be ensnared. There's going to be this cycle of consuming without ever being satisfied. In fact, Heinrich Fromm wrote about this. He said, this is a bottomless pit that exhausts the person in an endless effort to satisfy without ever reaching satisfaction. It's just an endless pit. It just keeps pulling you down. Enough is never enough. And so I go back to why God gives these commands, in part because we cross these lines and we need his grace, and in part because he's saying life goes better if you take these things into your life seriously. You don't find yourself rushing and craving and wanting and feeling incomplete and always looking for the next high, the next thing, the next apparatus, the next experience, the next person to make you feel more whole. Because I'm telling you, it's just going to be, it goes better when you don't covet. So then from that, how can we begin to guard ourselves from the desire to acquire? Well, that's the next thing in your notes. You need to embrace a museum mentality. Embrace a museum mentality. I remember as a kid, we do field trips to museums, and I always loved going to museums, right? I mean, they're like one of my favorite things to engage in because there's so much there. But here's the things you have to remember about a museum. First of all, they're a place where you can learn from history. You can learn from history. And so in the same way, all you need to do is go, when it comes to coveting, I'm going to learn from history. What can I learn? And I think about Genesis 3. Adam and Eve coveted, and it didn't go well. They wanted something outside of due time, outside of due process. They craved it, and it crushed them and everybody else that came behind them. Or you look at Isaiah chapter 14. Lucifer, Satan, the devil, he craved the throne of God. He wanted something outside of the plan, outside of the design. He hungered for something that wasn't his to have, and from that, man, that went awful and terrible. The book of Ecclesiastes is Solomon, this guy that basically tried everything. He tried every craving, every hunger, everything he coveted, he took, he had, and he was bored with, or he was wounded by, or he felt incomplete in light of possessing those things. And we know of people, even more recently in our lives, where we go, man, history just tells me that, it doesn't pay off. I was reading something recently about Richard Pryor, and he says, man, I had money and fame and women and stuff, but I had no peace. Had no peace. Didn't matter how much stuff he had. He had no peace. Harrison Ford said something similar. He's like, man, I've reached the top of my game, but I have no contentment in life. Right? And you're like, well, wait, but you everything the world could offer you have, right? And it can't fill those voids. Can't sustain our soul. And so learn from history. Nobody ever coveted and it went well in their life. They may gain stuff, but something else inside is just broken and decaying. The other thing you have to remember when you go to a museum, remember you're looking at dead people's stuff. In other words, when you walk into a museum, you know what you need to say? This is a person's storage unit. And of the storage unit, it's the one thing in the unit that was cool. Everything else was thrown away and burned. Right? So in other words, it goes back to kind of the stockpile market. We're all going to die, and whatever we've amassed, what? All that stuff we needed, what? Most of it is probably going to be seen as junk. It's going to go to a landfill, it's going to go to Goodwill, it's going to go elsewhere. Very few things are going to be retained by the people of our lives. And even that is kind of a frustration. Going again into Ecclesiastes chapter 2, we see Solomon writing about this. He says, man, I hated all my toil which I toiled under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to a man who will come after me, and who knows whether he's going to be wise or a fool. says, but man, he's going to be the master over all this stuff. I worked hard, I labored, I did everything, but then I die before I can fully enjoy it. It's going to be left to somebody else, and they get to enjoy it. And he goes, and I just don't know what I'm in for with that. Right? You're going to work your whole life, you're going to get all this stuff, you're going to sacrifice some important things, and then in the end, you leave it to your nephew, Bookie. Right? You leave him a nice car and he's putting out his cigarettes on the dashboard. Oh, Uncle left me this car. It's so awesome. Here, hold my beer. Watch this, right? You're going to leave it to somebody that's potentially a fool. Or you might leave it to somebody who's wise, but they don't really maybe have the same appreciation. You labored, you worked, you did everything else, and then you just don't know what comes out of it. You just got to remember that someday some of your stuff just may be in a museum and it's like dead people stuff. And how much did it really matter? Right? Those are the things we have to remind ourselves of as we're living. How much does it really matter? See, where we'll do well is to really focus on Christ-side economics. Christ-side economics are pretty simple. They're found in 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6 starts in verse 6. It says, godliness with contentment is great gain. This is where you really get rich. He says, if you want to crave anything, this is what you want to crave. Godliness with contentment is great gain. That's where you get rich, man. For we brought nothing into this world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. He says, but if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root, not the root, but a root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and have pierced themselves with many pangs. What I think is so insightful about this is, again, we tend to have this trigger in us that looks at the Bible through a purely moral window. And here, this is a wisdom statement, right? So he's saying, you want life to go better, and happier, and be more fulfilling, and more meaningful, and more complete. Godliness with contentment. That's it. But if you're always wanting, craving, needing, desiring, expanding the wish list, buying and giving away, and never feeling whole, he says that's going to result in all kinds of pain here, right? Because joy is never going to be found in what you acquire. Joy is going to be found in the contentment that is given by God. Godliness with contentment is rich. Everything else is poverty of spirit. And so that's where we just want to go, okay, that's the thing I want to strive for. If I really want to be content, it's not going to be getting another thing. It's going to be adding these ideas to my life, godliness with contentment. And a way to do that is something that I've tried to own over the years. It's one of my favorite passages from my favorite book of the Bible. It's the book of Ecclesiastes, which is why I've been referring to it so much today. I think there's a lot of richness in Ecclesiastes, and part of that is because Solomon spends his whole his time in this work saying, again, I tried to be fulfilled by all this stuff. I tried sex, I tried power, I tried being philanthropic. Right? So he tried good things like wisdom and knowledge and everything else. And I tried reckless, crazy things like partying and, everything. I tried real estate and I tried all this stuff and I found all of it to not deliver. Did not make life complete. And so he kind of has these conclusions then throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. I think like 5 times he says, but here's what I've realized. Here's what I need to do. And man, that makes everything okay. And I want to read one of the many conclusions. This is what we can all strive to live by. He says in Ecclesiastes 5, behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and to drink and to find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, those few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power, hey, enjoy them. And accept your lot in life and rejoice in your toil. This is the gift of God, for he will not much remember the days of his life that come after. So what he wants to really do is just let God keep him occupied with the joy of his heart. What the writer here, Solomon, is saying is just enjoy the little stuff wherever you're at. Because no matter what you have, if you don't have God in your life to give you the joy of those things, you're going to be left wanting. And that's what he found. I had everything. I had no joy. What I found is that when my life was centered on God, godliness with contentment is great gain. So when my life was centered on God, I can enjoy what I had. I didn't need more. I was cool if I had less. Because God equips me, God gives me what I need for life. He gives me joy. There's never going to be joy apart from Jesus. This is why we say life is better with Jesus. Because then whatever you have, wherever you're at, whatever your circumstance or situation, you can be content. I close with the words of Tozer. He tells us your deepest meaning in life is not found in what you possess, but rather in the one who possesses you. That is your deepest meaning. Let's pray together. Jesus, I thank you that you offer us contentment. I thank you that you offer us peace. I thank you that you offer fulfillment. I thank you that you offer us release from the desire to acquire, from the obsession with possession. You release us from trying to find our worth of fulfillment in stuff or experience or people that ultimately in the end kind of leave us wanting. This world does not offer fulfillment. It offers distraction. It offers temporary sustaining, maybe even spikes here or there, but then ultimately we find ourselves discouraged, lacking, looking for the next thing. And we know that only you can provide, only you can heal, only you can strengthen, only you can fill us up. So prove that to us when we are so tantalized to run to other filling agents. Show us how you fill. We ask this in your giving, gracious, kind name. Amen.